Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, Greg Anthony here, and glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this March 28th, 2017 day on our calendar. Let's start off by making some bold statements. I consider the Jesuits of Rome to control many Muslim countries, Israel and America as well. And by the Hegelian dialectic that we talk about, they are pitting each against each other to foment what I consider to be a coming World War III, when Muslim countries will attack Israel. That's a pretty bold statement, and I guess 99% of the American population would call me crazy. But let's look at a few things that happened in World War I and World War II. It's my opinion that wars, folks, aren't accidental. I believe they're fomented and caused by an underbelly of Jesuit thinking. Together, I believe, they set in motion and caused both World War I and World War II, which dramatically moved the world forward towards their eventual New World Order that we talk about many times. I call it the Vatican-led New World Order. The Third World War will cause the creation of a New World Order in the name of peace, but it will create much persecution against Jesus and his followers. Thus, the great battle to ensue is already underway, and I've shown in this country how our leaders have actually allowed radical Islam to fester and grow here, and I've cited many different examples of a number of radical Islamic groups, over 30 to 40, even cited by the Clarion Project, which is trying to monitor this. And the one example I gave was that little hamlet up in upstate New York called Islamburg, where the FBI has even monitored them, showing pictures of them marching, saying death to America. My question was, why don't they kick them out? Why don't they arrest them? Like they did to the Christian ministry of Tony Alamo, who was not trying to overthrow America, didn't hate America, and was depicted as a cult. Now, why was that group persecuted for over 40 years and the pastor put in jail for 175 years for crimes he didn't commit? Because he criticized the Vatican and the Jesuit control of this country and the world, like we do here. And again, 99% of the population is going to believe the bogus press, what they put out about this ministry, while the press doesn't say one word or doesn't talk much about radical Islam, and will never talk about the Jesuits who fomented ISIS, who basically is in control of most of our foreign policy. Now, I made a statement. I said that World War III is coming, and it will be Jesuit-driven. But the Jesuits also fomented World War I. You don't read it in the history books because they write the history books. But they caused the overthrow of the Tsars of Russia, which brought in atheistic communism, which has been used to destroy other governments and to weaken religions. And they caused the Ottoman Empire to lose control of Palestine, to prepare the way for the Jews to come back and populate it. The Jesuits then fomented World War II by empowering Hitler and the Nazi regime to persecute Jews in order to strengthen and justify the creation of Israel and Palestine. Now, the Jesuits are gathering the major religions today by pitting Muslims, the kings of the East, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, against Israel. Of course, America is involved because they're one of our closest allies, right? But will this lead to World War III, where Muslim countries will war against each other? Now, do you know there's a statue of Albert Pike in Washington? Now, he's a Satanist and Freemason, but he predicted 3 wars, and 2 previous ones matched up exactly to what I just said. it may seem odd to pay attention to a Satanist, but his plan for the 3 world wars fulfills Bible prophecy so we can gain insight into how their evil plans will be carried out, so that we can be prepared. That's what this is all about. You have to prepare yourself for what's about to happen. And lately I've been doing a number of shows regarding Islam, talking about the similarities between Catholicism and Islam. And I also brought a lot of facts to bear that the Vatican created Islam in the 7th century to kill Christians and Jews, and that today they're still using Muslims to kill Christians and Jews, and they will use them to cause World War III. Is that a possibility? And what will that cause? The formation of what I call the Vatican-led New World Order, where such religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are done away with, and the pure doctrine of Lucifer brought in. They will cause Muslims to kill Muslims, Christians to kill Muslims, Christians and supposed Christians to kill Jews. And the whole battle continues. And what's left? One religion, one world government, setting the stage for Lucifer's plan to take over. Right? Now, I've also done shows showing that the Vatican worships Lucifer. Pointed to one of their Easter ceremonies when we're in Latin, they actually say that. But no one talks about that, right? Now, someone brought to bear Daniel 2:34 to me. And he said, "You watched while a stone was cut out with hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them into pieces." Okay, the Bible quote that kind of explains what's going on. Now, isn't it interesting? Anytime you start criticizing Islam, you get called a racist. And when I criticized Islam recently, calling it a religion of intolerance and violence, I got a number of emails calling me a racist. And why am I picking on Islam? And I said, I'm not. I'm an equal opportunity critic. And if you look at my shows over the last 10 years, you will see that I've criticized the Vatican way more than I've criticized the hierarchy of the Islamic religions. Now, here's the point. It's not meant to criticize Catholics. My only criticism to many card-carrying Catholics who think what I'm saying is crazy is that they really never look at what their hierarchy is all about. I was fortunate. I lived in Rome for 7 years and got to learn firsthand what they're all about. And that goes for Muslims out there too, who really have no idea that even the Vatican's involved with your religion, that there are many similarities, and you have to look to why Islam was created. And you have an obligation, and not just to recite prayers 5 times a day, but also to look at what your hierarchy is all about. And then I got criticism because I started to say things like Dr. Peter Hammond stated in his book, Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam, where he documents how Muslims slowly develop a presence in various countries as their populations number build, become more aggressive and assertive about exercising Sharia law. He says Islam isn't really a religion, nor is it a cult. In its fullest form, it's a complete, total, 100% system of life. Hammond said this: Islam has religious, legal, political, economic, social, and military components. The religious component is a cover for all other components. And I think that you can say the same about the Vatican when you look at how their tentacles spread all over the world. Religion is a cover for what they're all about. Both the hierarchy of the Islamic faith and also the Vatican are intolerant. And once they gain sufficient numbers, they will take over a country. Now, what Hammond says is this is called Islamization. Begins when the population of Muslim reaches a critical mass and they being to agitate for various rights. He says open, free, democratic societies are particularly vulnerable. Why? Because we let them in to do what they want. When politically correct, tolerant, and culturally diverse societies agree to Muslim demands for their religious privileges, Some of the other components, he says, will creep in as well. And he said this is how it works. And let me repeat this. And I got a couple of really good clips to play regarding Islam by the numbers. And then, are there really no-go zones like there are in London here in America? We'll look at that perhaps a little bit later in the show. But he says this. When the Muslim populations remain under 2% in a country, they will be seen as a peace-loving minority, and not as a threat to other citizens. And that's what you hear in this country, that Muslims are peace-loving. Now, what's the percentage of the population here in America? Oh, let's look at recently. Well, let me see if I could find this. The Pew Research Center recently did a study and stated that Muslims are the fastest growing religion in the world, right? There are between 1.6 billion Muslims in the world as of 2010, roughly 23% of the global population. Yet many facts about Muslims are not well known in some of the places, and most Americans who live in a country like this, with a relatively small Muslim population, say they know little or nothing about Muslim, and all they know is what they hear on the media. So you can be led around by the nose, right? Now, the Muslim population in Europe is growing, and we project that all Europeans will be, that 10% of all Europeans will be Muslim by 2050. These, when you start looking at the demographics and you start looking, they say that Muslims will make up 2.1% of the U.S. population by the year 2050, surpassing people who identify as Jewish on the basis of religion. And they say that by the turn of the century, it will be the largest religion in the world. These are just stats that they're putting out at the Pew Research Center. Dr. Hammond, let's see what Dr. Hammond found out. And we talked about this. We said that there are about 1% population in America, 1.5 in Australia, 1.9 in Canada, 1.8 in China, and Italy 1.5, Norway 1.8, which is growing. And he says this, as the Muslim population reaches 2 to 5%, they begin to recruit from ethnic minorities and disaffected group with prisons and street gangs. We're seeing that even here in America, right? When it gets higher than that, from 5% on, they exercise influence in proportion to the percentage of the population. Hammond, who's also a missionary and has studied this closely by visiting most of these countries, for example, they will push for introduction of halal, clean by Islamic standards food, and increase pressure on supermarket chains to feature such foods on their shelves, along with threats for failure to comply. Now, this is happening as we speak in France, the Philippines, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Trinidad and Tobago, other places like that. And soon they will apply pressure to allow Sharia law within their communities. And we're seeing this happen in Europe right now. No-go zones, where Sharia law is practiced and the laws of France and the laws of England make no difference to them. But when Muslims reach 10% of the population, they tend to increase lawlessness as a means of complaint about their conditions. And he notes this. He said, in Paris, we're already seeing car burnings, and any non-Muslim action offends Islam and results in uprisings and threats. What about when they killed Charlie Hebdo because he did a cartoon on Muhammad, such as also in Amsterdam with opposition to Muhammad cartoons and films about Islam. These tensions are seen on a regular basis now in countries like Guyana, India. Do you know Israel has a 16% Muslim population? Kenya, 10%, where Obama was probably born. The violence increases when Muslim populations reach 20%. And the question is, what happens? After reaching 20, nations can expect rioting, jihad militia formations, sporadic killings and burnings of Christian churches and Jewish synagogues. Now, Ethiopia, 32.8%. At 40%, nations experience widespread massacres, chronic terror attacks, and ongoing militia warfare, such as in Bosnia, Chad, and other places where populations are above 40 and as high as in Lebanon of 60%. But from 60% on, infidels, persecution of non-believing infidels rises significantly, including sporadic ethnic cleansing, genocide, use of Sharia law as a weapon, and taxes are placed on infidels, such as in Albania, 70%, Malaysia, 60%, Qatar, 70%, Sudan, 70%. But after 80%, expect a daily intimidation and violent jihad. Some state-run ethnic cleansing and even some genocide. So then those countries that have high populations, you know what they are. I don't have to go over each one. There's a whole series of them: Bangladesh, Egypt, Gaza, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Morocco, Pakistan, Palestine, 99%, Syria, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. And isn't it interesting that Saudi Arabia, we're selling arms by the, I'm telling you, we're supporting Saudi Arabia when they are probably one of the biggest violators of everything behind the scenes. But we're giving them arms, and nothing's changed under Trump. Now, he put a travel ban, which has been now contested in the courts, which doesn't have much chance of success in the long run. But he didn't put it on Saudi Arabia. I always thought that was kind of weird. Now, 100% Muslim society will theoretically usher in their version of peace, the peace of Dar es Salaam, the Islamic House of Peace. Here is there supposed to be peace because everybody's a Muslim, and nobody can do anything else. But is that peace? Madrasas are the only school, and Quran is the only word. And if you don't believe in that, they'll cut your head off. Now, is that peace? But unfortunately, peace is never achieved, says Dr. Hammond, in these 100% states of the most radical Muslims who intimidate, spew hatred, and satisfy their bloodlust by killing less radical Muslims for a variety of reasons. Thus, the honor killings you see. Did you know in some countries, if a woman does something against her father that is basically what they consider immoral or something, and it's very ridiculous. I mean, she may just drive a car or something. I don't know. It gets really bad, but they can actually kill one of their own, and they're not prosecuted for murder. It's amazing. Now, today, Muslims, like I said, he says makes up 22% of the world's population. But their birth rates are higher than Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, and all other believers. Muslims will exceed 50% of the world's population by the end of the century. But I believe that's too slow for the Jesuits and the powers to be. That's why you're seeing them create radical Islam. They want to move this along. They want this world to explode long before the turn of the century. So that's what we talk about in this show. And like I said, we have a statue of Albert Pike who predicted this in a letter he wrote to Giuseppe Mazzini way before World War I and World War II. And this letter, who now you'll read is bogus, was actually displayed in a British museum. And once this got out on the web, once people started talking about it, they took it out. They don't want you to know what they have planned for you. And that's what we try to discuss on this show. And we will continue to do that. Now, excuse me. What's the difference? Did you ever think about this? What's the difference between Shiite Muslims and Sunni Muslims? Well, I went to the Pew Report, and this is, listen to this analogy they make, which is completely bogus. And it doesn't have anything to do with Sunnis or Shiites, but they say this: Sunnis and Shiites are two subgroups of Muslims, just as Catholics and Protestant are two subgroups within Christianity. Well, that's a false statement, because Catholicism is not Christianity when you really look at it. Because Protestantism, the true protest of Protestantism, was opposed to Catholic tradition. There's a difference between Christianity and Catholicism, but that's never brought up because the Vatican wants to mesh the two together. Now, what do they do with what did they do? Now, if you believe the premise that they created Islam, They have two groups here. But Sunnis and Shiites are always fighting against each other, similar to the way Catholics and Protestants did, correct? And the Sunni-Shiite divide is very old, dating back to a dispute over the succession of leadership in the Muslim community following the death of Muhammad in 632, right? While the two groups agree on some core tenets of Islam, there are differences in their beliefs and practices. So I guess you should look into that. And in some cases, Sunnis do not consider Shiites to be Muslims. With the exception of a few countries, including Iran, which is majority Shiite, as well as Iraq and Lebanon, which are split, most nations with a large number of Muslims have more Sunnis than Shiites. In the U.S., 65% identify as Sunnis, 11 as Shiites, with the rest identifying with neither group, including some who just say, well, we're just Muslim. But again, little do we understand, Shiites and Sunnis are killing each other, correct? And it reminds me of what the Catholics did against the Protestants in the old Protestant Reformation. Now, has that died? Has the Protestant Reformation died? Or has it just been taken over by the ecumenical Vatican movement? I think you can honestly say that most Protestant churches no longer view Catholicism like our Protestant reformers did, save what Pope John Paul said were a few splinter groups in this country, in America, and the world that need to be reined in. And he even stated, and I'm just paraphrasing, that if they're not reined in, we know how to deal with them. And you can see how they deal with splinter groups that Pope John Paul II talked about when you look at what they did to the Tony Alamo Ministry, who basically was using the Bible and preaching about the Antichrist like the Protestant reformers did. Now, prior to the King James Bible, there was the Geneva Bible, primarily written by the same people, but it had footnotes in it, which had been taken out of the King James. And in those footnotes, you don't see too many Geneva Bibles around. It was clear that when you read the book of Revelations and certain parts of Daniel and other parts of the Bible, they referred to the Antichrist as the agency of providence or the Vatican. Right. Now, it's interesting those notes were taken out of the King James. But anyway, so that's the real difference now. And the Vatican, instead of killing people like they did during the Protestant Reformation, what they do is kill people silently now, and they take over their religions. They take over Protestantism through the ecumenical movement, infiltrating churches. And the ones that can't be reined in, like the Tony Alamo Ministry, are destroyed, or in an attempt to destroy them totally. They basically accuse the pastors of, like Tony Alamo, of crimes he didn't commit. Then they take the children away, stating that they're in danger when they're not. Never any child abuse was found in the Alamo case, right? They still took the children. And 3, they start taking their property. And one of the largest civil settlements in Arkansas's history was against the Tony Alamo Ministry. But why do they allow these radical Muslim groups to fester and grow here? Are they working together with the Vatican to end Western civilization as we know it? I believe that's their goal. And unless we understand what's going on, we have no idea what and when they're going to do their, how they're going to do their dirty work. So in the next half hour, I'm going to play a few clips regarding Islam by the numbers. And you're going to listen to a little clip about, are there no-go zones here, like there are in Europe? Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet. or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour. And like I said in the opening of the show, when you start bringing up statistics and facts like I've brought up over the weeks, the past 2 or 3 weeks, you get called a racist. And I've gotten a number of emails like that. I've responded to it. And what I did want to do is, to get this in, I got to move quickly here because I got 2 little clips I want to play. But this little presentation was given on December 10th, 2015. It's By the Numbers, The Untold Story of Muslim Opinions and Demographics. And it says that By the Numbers, it's an honest and open discussion about Muslim opinions and demographics. It's narrated by Raheel Raza, president of a group I've never heard of called Muslims Facing Tomorrow. And she says in this short film, it's about acceptance that radical Islam is a bigger problem than most politically correct governments and individuals are ready to admit. Is ISIS, the Islamic State, trying to penetrate the U.S.? We've shown you examples, yes. With this refugee influx, are Muslims radicalized on U.S. soil? We've shown it through the Fethullah Gulen movement, and I'm saying some of this. We've shown it through the Fethullah Gulen movement. And to this day, folks, the presidents, both Obama, Trump, Clinton, Bush, will not turn over Fethullah Gulen to Turkey because Erdogan, the president there, who we tried to overthrow to further destabilize the Middle East, states that Gulen was the problem in Turkey. His so-called moderate groups became radical groups and wanted to overthrow the Turkish government, like they're doing in. He's got billions of dollars in private schools in our country, brought here by Clinton in the 90s, and supposedly they're teaching, like I've stated on many shows, moderate Islam. No, they're breeding ground for radical Islam. And this little presentation states are asking, are Muslims being radicalized here? Are organizations such as CAIR, C-A-I-R, who purport to represent American Muslims, accepting and liberal or radicalized with links to terror organizations? Now, a good place to go to read about stuff like this, you can go to theclarionproject.org and read some of their information. And let's go to this presentation by Raheel Raza.
Almost every day, we are told that Islamist terrorism has nothing to do with Islam.
Muslims are peaceful and tolerant people and have nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism.
Al-Qaeda's cause is not Islam. ISIL is not Islamic.
And we are told that Muslims reject the extremists.
The overwhelming majority of Muslims reject that interpretation of Islam. It's very important for us to align ourselves with the 99.9% of Muslims who are looking for the same thing we're looking for.
But is it true that 99.9% of Muslims don't support extremism? What would you say if scientific polls by major research organizations have repeatedly shown a very different picture? I'm Raheel Raza. I'm a Sunni Muslim, and for the past 20 years I've dedicated my life to speaking out against the rising threat of radical Islam. When there is a disease or a virus, it can't be treated unless you identify the problem. So we have to call it what it is, and it is violent, radical, extremist Islamism. This is not an easy topic to discuss, but in light of the fact that most of the terrorism in the world today involves Muslims in one way or another, and because it directly affects our lives and security, I think that we need to be able to have an open, honest, and fact-based conversation about that.
Let's be honest. Islam has a problem today. There is a cancer of extremism within Islam today.
This is not a conversation about Islam. It's a conversation about the growing threat of radical Islam and how it affects us all. And that conversation begins now. Our society has evolved to a point where we can have a civilized debate about almost anything. Anything except what may be the most important issue of our time, the rise of radical Islam.
Liberals somehow feel worried that they're going to be called racist if they criticize people of the Muslim faith.
This fear of being called a racist has caused many people to act against their better judgment, and it may have even cost innocent lives.
At least 14 killed, another 17 wounded. It happened in San Bernardino, a city.
In San Bernardino, California, 2 Muslim terrorists who had pledged allegiance to ISIS killed at least 14 people.
Inside Farouk's house, police found a virtual bomb-making laboratory with smokeless powder and remote-control cars.
But a few weeks before the attack, some neighbors apparently noticed suspicious activity but didn't call the police. Why?
That man that was interviewed said he never said anything because he didn't want to be seen as racially profiling.
Did political correctness cost people their lives? It's hard to say for sure, but we do know that it's become harder and harder to speak about these things without being told we are racist.
Freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear of violence. These are liberal principles that liberals applaud for. But then when you say, in the Muslim world, this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
It's an ugly thing to say. It's gross. It's racist. How about the more than a billion people who aren't fanatical, who don't punch women, who just want to go to school?
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Any of the things, but you're saying all Muslims.
Wait a second.
Stereotyping.
Wait a second.
And you're painting the whole religion with that.
Well, I'm a Muslim, and I don't need Ben Affleck defending me and my religion. I appreciate it. But I don't need celebrities defending me from talk show hosts. I need to be defended from the radicals in my own religion who want me dead. Radical Islamists who behead people, set people on fire, pour battery acid on women's faces, murder people in the name of my God.
فقسما بأمر الله لنتكن أمريكا وبعقرها في واشنطن بإذن الله تعالى.
Radicals who seek to take over the world in the name of my religion.
We need to establish the domination of Islam.
We believe that the Sharia will be implemented worldwide.
سوف تستعيد زعامة العالم.
So let's get real and look at some numbers. Today there are around 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. In fact, Islam is the world's fastest growing religion, and according to Pew Research, it will surpass Christianity this century. Now, obviously, not all Muslims are radical, but a certain percentage are. Sam Harris helps break it down for Ben Affleck and for all of us.
As you say, we have 1.5, 1.6 billion Muslims. Now,
second biggest religion in the world, a quarter.
Well, Ben, let me unpack this. Let me unpack this for you.
Please do.
We have just imagine some concentric circles here. You have at the center, you have jihadists. These are people who wake up in the morning wanting to kill apostates, wanting to die trying. They believe in paradise. They believe in martyrdom.
That's the first circle of radicals. Violent jihadists like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Hezbollah, Hamas, and various lone wolves. These are the jihadists who murder people in San Bernardino, Texas, Paris, London, Delhi, Jerusalem, Ottawa, Madrid, Nairobi, Boston, and of course New York. These are the horrible bad people, as Ben Affleck said. So how many violent jihadists are there? There are anywhere between 40,000 to 200,000 Muslims involved in fighting for ISIS across the world. That's just ISIS. And it doesn't include the hundreds of thousands of jihadis fighting for Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and other groups. But the thing about terrorism is that it only takes a handful of terrorists to do serious damage and even change the way a society operates.
Explosives hidden in shoes and other improvised bombs are an active, ongoing threat.
And with the refugee crisis, the number of ISIS jihadis operating in the West is also set to increase.
The huge numbers are a challenge to security, with many arriving refusing to identify themselves upon arrival in Europe.
This is the ideal situation for ISIS to penetrate several countries in Europe.
And according to reports, the mastermind of the Paris attacks snuck into Europe claiming to be a refugee.
He boasted of being able to travel freely between Europe and Syria.
And while radical Islamists are sneaking into Europe, twice as many British Muslims are fighting for ISIS than are fighting in the British Armed Forces.
In the gruesome video showing James Foley's murder, many were shocked to hear his executioner speaking with a British accent.
This is James Wright Foley.
America is not immune to this danger.
Today, federal prosecutors say a man trained in Syria returned to the United States to launch a terrorist attack here at home.
According to U.S. Homeland Security, there have been over 122 U.S. terrorist cases involving homegrown violent jihadists since 9/11. Fortunately, many of them have been thwarted by law enforcement. That's the first circle. Murderous, violent jihadists in Europe, in America, and around the world. But what about the next circle outside of them?
Outside of them, we have Islamists. These are people who are just as convinced of martyrdom and paradise and wanting to foist their religion on the rest of humanity, but they want to work within the system. They're not going to blow themselves up on a bus. They want to change governments. They want to use democracy against itself.
Islamists want many of the same things as the jihadists. It's just that their tactics differ. So instead of engaging in terror themselves, they use the political and cultural system to further their aims. Take Gaza, for example. In 2006, Palestinians voted Hamas into power. Hamas is a radical terrorist group that used democracy to gain legitimacy and political power. Also included in this circle are a large percentage of Egyptians who in 2012 elected the Muslim Brotherhood into power.
Egypt has a new president this evening, Mohammed Morsi, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Brotherhood was formed in Cairo in 1928. It's known as the progenitor of modern political Islam and has a stated goal of establishing a global caliphate or Islamic state run in accordance with Sharia law.
Morsi wants to impose Islamic law, limit the rights of women, his party is not pro-American.
Now, while the Muslim Brotherhood is primarily a political organization, it has spawned many terrorist groups around the world, including Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and others. Although distinct from the groups we just described, there is an organization here in North America called CARE, which the Department of Justice said is or was a member of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood. CARE presents itself as a moderate civil rights group representing the interests of Muslims in America. Yet, when you look a little closer, many disturbing things start to emerge.
The controversial American Muslim group is facing new charges of ties to Islamic terrorism.
The United Arab Emirates has just listed CARE as a terrorist organization. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are also on that list.
And in the United States, CARE was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in a major terror funding trial. Groups like CARE try to silence people like myself and others who dare to speak out about radical Islam. Case in point, a film that I was in featuring 9 women who spoke out against barbaric treatment of women by radical Islamists got shut down.
Why would CARE want to silence this film?
That's what they do. They try to shut down debate by crying Islamophobia, even at Muslims like me. That's the second circle. Now, this next circle is the largest of them all, and this is very disturbing. The Muslims in this circle are certainly not like ISIS, and they're not working to overthrow governments like the Muslim Brotherhood, but they do hold beliefs and practices that no doubt will seem radical to you and me.
They hold views about human rights and about women, about homosexuals that are deeply troubling.
Who are they? What are their beliefs? In 2013, Pew Research released a comprehensive study based on interviews with thousands of Muslims in 39 countries. It reported that in countries like Afghanistan, Egypt, and Jordan, the vast majority of Muslims surveyed, between 79 to 86%, believe that those who leave the Muslim faith should be executed. Do you know anyone who has left their faith? Do you think they should be executed? Do you think that that's a radical belief? If we were to take the average from all the Muslims surveyed around the world, we end up with an average of 27% who believe that apostates should be executed. 27% of those surveyed, that equals 237 million people. Did you know that 39% of all Muslims in the countries surveyed believe that honor killings can be a justifiable punishment for a woman who has had pre- or extramarital sex? Do you think that's a radical belief? That radical belief is held by over 345 million Muslims. These studies paint a picture of an Islamic world that is increasingly out of step with the modern world. When it comes to support for terrorism and jihad, these are the numbers for young Muslims aged 18 to 29 in Western countries. 42% of French Muslims, 35% of British Muslims, and 26% of American Muslims believe suicide bombings against non-Muslims can be justified. This is the next generation of Muslim speaking. A majority of Muslims surveyed, 53%, said they want Sharia or Islamic law to be the law of the land in Muslim majority countries. Of those who said they want Sharia to be the law of the land, over 52% said they support whippings and cutting off of hands of thieves. This comes to about 281 million people. Do you think that's a radical belief? And 51% say they're in favor of stoning spouses if they're unfaithful, which equals 289 million people. Of course, not every Muslim believes in these things, but hundreds of millions do. The numbers are right here for all to see. Honest conversation about one of the most important issues of our time. By silencing the debate about radical Islamist beliefs, we abandon our own core beliefs of truth, free speech, and tolerance. And we abandon human rights in favor of political correctness. Together, we have begun the conversation. Now it's time for you to have your say.
So, as you can see from that short presentation, I'm not the only one that gets called a racist when you start bringing up facts regarding what's really going on inside of Islam. This is interesting. This is about a 5-minute clip. I even found this. This was on a mainstream Fox News channel. And watch what they found out.
We've been telling you all about France's no-go zones, hundreds of Muslim-controlled areas around Paris that outsiders and cops don't dare to explore. They chose just to give it up. We have them here in the United States, too. I bet you did not know that. Nearly 24 enclaves popping up across 9 different states. And watch what happens when a stranger or an outsider tries to step inside.
But your land is open to the public. I'm not being nice about it because I don't appreciate y'all. The way y'all came up here. Okay? Leave. Period. Leave. Period. Don't say another word.
Joining us right now, the man behind that camera, founder and president of the Christian Action Network and author of Twilight in America, the untold story of Islamic training camps in America. Martin Moyer joins us right now. Martin, what was taking place right there? Where were you?
Well, we were in Red House, Virginia. It's an isolated community, as most of these compounds are located in rural areas, heavily wooded, inside of the mountainous areas. And what we wanted to do was challenge their open invitation to actually come onto these compounds and see whether they were peaceful or not. So we brought our cameras, we tried to get on, and this is how we got treated.
And quickly, this is the whole thing that we're seeing here. What goes on in these campuses? A lot of people say, hey, there are Jewish camps in this country, Christian camps in this country. Why can't we have a Muslim camp?
Because these are truly no-go zones. Unlike the ones in Europe, which I have visited, you can actually walk into those no-go zones. You can walk in with your cameras, you can talk to people, but in these particular no-go zones, you cannot get into. They have gates, they have armed guards, they have security forces, and when you go up into them, you're specifically told to leave these particular areas, and they're particularly dangerous.
And we're watching right now. Where are we seeing this footage from?
This is a video they put out for the people inside of the compounds so that they learn how to do terrorist-type training. They teach them how to kidnap people, how to strangle them, how to kill guards, how to do guerrilla-type warfare training. And this is what goes on in these isolated no-go zones inside the United States.
In America, name some states, name some areas, because you also say they're affiliated with a Pakistani militant group.
Yeah, that Pakistani militant group is called Jamaat al-Furqa, run by Sheikh Jilani, who most people haven't heard of, but that is the guy that Daniel Pearl, Wall Street Journal, was hoping to interview and was arranging to interview when he was kidnapped and then later beheaded.
So name some towns, name some cities, name some states. Where are
Well, we have him in Texas, Sweeney, Texas. We have him in York, South Carolina. We have him in Commerce, Georgia. We have him in Red House, Virginia. We have him in upstate New York. We have him in California. We have him in Michigan. They're scattered all around the United States.
So right now, when you call an officer and say, hey, wait a second, you got an enclave here, this is Islamic extremists being trained on our ground, what is the law enforcement's reaction?
Well, the interesting thing about these camps, they're located in very rural areas of America, which has very small police departments, and they intentionally set them up in these areas where, for instance, the one in New York, they have a total of 4 police officers.
I want you to hear what you say is a recruitment, sound of a recruitment video to fill up these camps. Listen.
You're most welcome to join one of our, advanced training course in Islamic, or in Michigan, or in South Carolina, or in Pakistan, wherever we are, you can reach us.
Where'd you get that?
Well, actually, it took about 4 years to actually locate that video. We knew it existed, and we had someone inside of a law enforcement department out of Colorado who snuck us the tape, and finally we were able to make it public.
FBI's reaction?
FBI's reaction is that, look, they have the First Amendment and other American rights to operate these enclaves in the United States, regardless of the type of weapon training, guerrilla warfare training that's going on inside of them.
It's not okay with me, and it certainly doesn't seem to be okay with you. Martin Moyer, thanks so much, President and CEO of the Christian Action Network.
Okay, I hope you heard that at the end. The FBI's reaction was, we can't do anything. It's a First Amendment right. But really, who's telling them to lay off? Now, we can look back to Obama and say, well, he was sympathizing to radical Islam. Well, if Trump is really serious about protecting the American people, why haven't the policies changed? Is he festering Islamic terror here, just like Obama, but in a different manner? And please, write your newspapers, your congressmen, anybody you can. If you're not aware, I've started a website called FreeTonyAlamo.com that talks to you regarding how the FBI, the BATF, came down on this Christian ministry. They weren't preaching guerrilla warfare, violence, or anything. In fact, it was the complete opposite. All they were doing was acting as the Protestant reformers did during their fight. And that's what this country was founded on, right? Supposedly Protestant values. But we have a country that's allowing radical Islam to grow while persecuting Christian ministries like the Alamo Ministry. Go to FreeTonyAlamo.com and read it. And then check out their ministry. You've been getting a rotten story from the mainstream about them for over 40 years. And finally, in 2008, they raided that ministry, framed the pastor for crimes he didn't commit, took away their children when there was no child abuse, and is now in the present, now taking away their property, while we're allowing these no-go zones when these Muslim groups in 9 different states are radicalizing people, but that's okay. Something, folks, is not right. And I think you'll know that there is something behind the scenes of any government in power in Washington, no matter if it's Trump or Obama. And we are sending to Mr. Trump a number of a petition that's been signed from that website. You can get to the petition, where hundreds of people from around the world are asking him to release Tony Alamo. And in the months to come, and then as soon as he puts his pardon attorney in office, he's not there yet, we will make a trip there. And I'm in the present time trying to get some of these Christian groups, like the one you just heard, to back this. And I'm working on that as we speak. So come back tomorrow, and I've got more on the Tony Alamo story. See you tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.